Thank you very much, Bob, and welcome to you all once again on this lovely summer's evening. And it's a joy to see our two old friends, Kevin and Stuart, again. As I said in the preamble to you, Kevin and Stuart gave us a presentation really just about the start of the pandemic, and I recall it was Thinking Differently, and it was a brilliant presentation. So it's great to actually invite them back, because as you will realize from, again, my blurb, they're actually looking at a subject which is close to my own heart, given the sort of magistrates and law background in why leaders choose trust and how important that is. And in fact, it's building up to an important book that they're doing in conjunction with The Economist. So I'm sure you're going to find it very interesting. It's going to be interactive. They're brilliant presenters, and I know certainly that Stuart was a professional presenter, so we'll probably see some of those techniques coming over. So over to you, Stuart and Kevin, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you everyone who's come along on a beautiful sunny evening. You could be sitting in the sunshine and you've chosen to come and watch us, and we're very grateful to you. Or maybe some of you are sitting in the sunshine, particularly those with the camera off, are sitting in the garden or on the beach or something, and have got us on a little phone sign. Why not? So but we're grateful for your attention and your time, and I think I hope you're going to find the next hour interesting and useful. Let me share my screen, and hopefully you can see that there. So we're going to talk about why leaders choose. Let me summarize what you're going to hear over the next hour. Okay, these are the core ideas that we're going to be talking about in the next hour. With your participation, we will be asking you please to think about what we're discussing and take part. One of the big ideas is that in this world of AI that everyone's talking about, don't think we need to bang on too much about that, emotional intelligence is going to be increasingly, in our view, the key differentiator in a world of artificial intelligence. We're going to discuss trust as a fundamental creator of value. If you're in the business of trying to create value as a leader, as a salesperson, as a business person, as a leader of an institution, organization, a government, then trust is the way you create that value. We'll talk about that. But you need to be intentional. It doesn't happen by accident. And it needs to be designed. And we're going to share with you today the formula for trust so that you can design high trust, high value relationships with those that you need to engage with. And it needs to be consistent, and we'll help you think through that. As I say, we're going to have this formula which we'll share. And one of the key ideas that is at the center of everything we think and talk about is this idea of interdependence. And so many relationships that we see in business or in any organization are transactional, with a sense that one party needs something from the other party is either selling to the other, whether it's an employee or a supplier. And actually, the truth of the matter is that in all cases that we can think of, people are and organizations are actually interdependent. And by recognizing that, you focus then on building high levels of trust, and we'll discuss that. So that's what we're going to hear about in the next hour and discuss over those next hour. Let me hand over to my colleague, Kevin, talk a bit about what the first idea we shared there.
Yeah, thanks. Before I jump into this, a couple of thoughts. As Stephen said, we're in the middle of writing a book for The Economist about why leaders should choose trust, and the book's called Choose Trust. So we'd be very interested in any insights that you have. The only thing I'd say is, if you want to say something but you don't want us to potentially highlight those kind of ideas in the book, do please say so, and I'm sure Bob can take it out, or we'll just make sure we don't quote it. So things are changing, obviously, very quickly in the world. And one of the things that's changing is the advent of AI, the rise of the machine. And interestingly, we asked ChatGPT to tell us which are the most at-risk jobs in the next 5 years. And they came up with this list. And what this means from a leader's point of view is you're going to be leading an organization which looks and does very different things as it goes forward. It's not going to be, in the case of a lawyer, just producing great legal precedents. AI can do it for you. It's not about producing contracts. It's not even about running best practice processes. All the processes that we see, AI is going to do faster and more effectively. So that leads us to the question, two questions really. What's going to be left? What is it that the leader is going to have that he or she is going to need to exercise with their people that today is perhaps not as important? And we're going to suggest to you and get your thinking as well, that we believe it's about trust. And now, look, AI is extending all over the place. I was listening to a podcast, a news podcast the other day, and that podcast was selected by news articles that I was interested in. And then the news was summarized for me by an AI reporter. So even the likes of Stuart back in his Sky and BBC days is under threat, because this AI does an excellent job at summarizing for me news articles I'm interested in. But can I trust them? What about all the videos and images we see? Can we trust them? Could they be making things up just to keep us happy or to deceive us in some way? So what we'd like to do is actually open up this forum very quickly to you and say, given this world of AI, given what we're needing to do differently, how does this affect your view of trust, and who or what do you think we can trust going forward? So be very interested if there's anybody who'd like to kick us off with either their experience or their thoughts on that area.
I guess the only thing with this is, why would we not trust AI more than a person doing that for us? Because particularly if it's a journalist, they'll put their own slant and their own views into the way they summarize something and the way they do the sort of editoring or editorialization of it. Whereas AI will be more impartial.
So that's an interesting point, isn't it? So in terms of the process of gathering and presenting news, the AI may well be more effective, and you may well trust its ability to gather. But actually, the thing that I was thinking about as you were talking there, what I'm looking for is an expert's interpretation. It's the human factor that they apply to it, that an AI won't. It will just do the analysis. But yeah, that's the kind of question we're going to ask. Who do I trust most? And why do I trust those people? So why do you trust a person rather than a machine?
People themselves coming in there, yeah.
I noticed Steve Gorton's got his hand up there.
Yeah.
Steve, do you want to jump in?
I think there's two things there. I think one thing is, what is the brief that one puts into the AI engine, and it will filter along those. So that's the sort of same question one might ask of anybody. It's sort of preconditioned. The other stuff is, certainly I'm hearing on the various interactions I have, if you ask it to reference something, it's producing some really interesting fake references, which if challenged, you find they don't exist.
Yeah.
Corrupted, but that would be the same. We just look at the various, I think, can I whether use lies or misleading statements that we get in the press, in Parliament and elsewhere. So I think your point, Timothy, was, is it any different from a biased human? It's a biased thing depending on what's been fed into ChatGPT or whatever. Garbage in, garbage out, if you will.
So what strikes me about what you've both been saying there is one-off interactions. Would I trust somebody just because I know them, that I hear from them once? But the opportunity for us as people is to build a relationship. And trust comes from not just the one-off interaction, not just because somebody does a process for me, but my continual involvement with that individual, and a sense, as we're going to see later, a sense that person has my interests at heart. And from everything I'm seeing, and I think we're seeing, an AI actually can't think about what your interests are in the same way that a human being is. So it can't create the relationship with you. It can be a very able servant. It can transact with you. It can give you lots of information, but it can't start to think about, at the moment at least, what is it that you need? and how can I support you in your ambition? Stuart, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's fascinating actually to have this discussion and people actually saying, actually, it's the AI I might trust more than humans. And I think the point here is that if you're leading an organization and you're thinking, how do I succeed and continue to succeed in the future? Our formula is on that screen, AI plus EI. This isn't, of course, to say humans, you're going to dismiss AI. Of course, it's going to have not just AI, all the technology, machine learning, automation of all sorts, but that the organizations that are going to differentiate and be better are the ones that also have a strong element of trusted humans building relationships with whoever their customers or their partners or their people they're serving are. And that's what we're urging you to think about. And then what does that look like? So those are my thoughts. There's another hand up there, which is actually Bob.
Yeah, I was just going to chip in. I think the interesting dynamic for me is the rubbish in, rubbish out element of AI, and the fact that you've got so many, in theory, trusted humans who actually prove not to be so trustworthy. I mean, the most obvious immediate example is Boris Johnson, and the kind of political firmament, has been clearly rocked a bit by that. But I think the other side of this is when you look at the list of professions you had on your previous slide, some of those at least might start out as low-level kind of research functionaries, if you will, where you can easily see they can be replaced. But they grow into things where your formula of AI plus EI is much, much more important. I mean, lawyers is a great example. I had reason recently to be in a Crown Court for the first time in my life, not as a defendant I had. And it was fascinating to watch the two KCs in action. And you're not going to get to that stage. I don't think you're ever going to get a kind of an AI to be able to deliver in the same way, shape or form with the kind of human interaction. It would fundamentally change that whole process. But they've grown up through that system. And if you take away the baseline, how on earth do you grow the people that ultimately you need them to be?
Well, let's just for time, because I think we could probably spend the rest of this session having that discussion, because AI opens up always incredibly interesting conversations. But our thing at the point we're trying to make, I think, here is that one thing AI, technology, digitization cannot do is be human. That's the one thing it can't be. So the focus then is, what does it mean? What advantages can humans have, particularly in a business environment? And one thing I can tell you about us is we are certainly not creations of AI, Kevin and myself. We definitely are genuine humans. Whether we have AI or not is another question, but we think we have. We run a business called Mutual Value, and Mutual Value really helps organizations do exactly this: build trust, build high value, high trust relationships as leaders, as salespeople, as partners with suppliers, that sort of thing. So we work in the relationship space. I want to say, if you want any of these slides at the end of this discussion, just email Sophie, and she will make sure you've got our information. So let's move on if we can. Here's the evidence, some of the evidence amongst a sea of evidence that trust creates value. And Deloitte did research quite recently. In fact, if you look at all the big four, they've all got big trust initiatives. The PwC have spending $100 million in the States on a trust institute. They realize that trust is now a fundamental thing that they're selling to their clients, to be trusted. And Deloitte did this research to demonstrate why, and you can see the research there on the screen. So it builds market value, customer loyalty, employee engagement, and the quality of business relationships. But, and there's a big but, this is quite interesting, because PwC, of course, did their own research into trust. And they looked at the gap between what people think is the level of trust they command and what the actual level of trust is. And so they researched with C-suite directors, and 87% of the people they surveyed said customers highly trust our company. Does anyone want to guess? Just put in the chat. Let's not, because just put in the chat what you think the actual figure was when they did the research with the people that actually dealt with their customers. So I can't see the chat. Oh, yes, I can. Just put in the chat what number, what percentage you think it is. So Amos is saying 12, 20, yeah, 50. Okay, I'll tell you, 30. Well, Tim, you win tonight's star prize. And for some reason it's gone backwards because the real figure was 30%. So there's a massive gap there between what we, if you like, smug executives and the reality. So then they looked at, do employees trust your company? 84% believed employees trusted their company. Guess what the real figure was that they found? Put that in the chat, please. What do you think? This is employee levels of trust in the company they work for. John Kerner says 60, 45, 15 from Tim.
There may be some personal experience coming out here.
Yeah, 25. I thought it might be low. Well, I think the person that said 60, several people said 60, was closest, because actually it was 69% according to their research.
Now, Stuart, if I can just add to this.
Yeah, do.
We've done a lot of surveys on boards, and you ask a board level, are you trustworthy? And you ask them, are the others on the board trustworthy? And I can tell you 85 to 90% of board members that have answered those questions for me have said, oh, yes, I'm trustworthy. I'm interested that there's still 5 or 10% who don't think they're trustworthy, but I'll leave that for the side. But then you see what percentage do they think of the rest of the board are trustworthy, and it falls to 40 or 50%. So others, you say others are trustworthy. So then the question to me is always, well, you're trustworthy, but others aren't. And all of you have said that, and you're all the others. So it's significant to me that trust, and PwC is spending a fortune trying to bring people in to train them as trustworthy leaders, is a critical issue at board level for leaders. And it's not, as one might assume, that we all trust each other. And you may have had experience of that. Certainly, I've seen this many times.
Kevin, the next slide is there, because what do you do about it? That's the question.
So this is an interesting thing. Small little model. Put the whole model up if you would, please, Stuart. Little model that we know really can change people's thinking. What we recognize is that the mindset we have towards the power of trust, or the value of trust, will drive our action, and our action creates outcomes for our business. So let's just give you a quick idea of how this might work, and you can think of it for your examples. So if I'm a leader who says, hey, my job is to provide instruction, direction, I'm supposed to know where we're going and we're off. Okay, so the kind of actions you see from those people are very transactional. They'll tend to have reward and recognition systems that support people who do what they say, stick and carrot. And there's a lot of businesses run on, and organizations run on that kind of stick and carrot transactional thinking, and get outcomes which we all measure at the stock market or in our reports to government, whatever. It's a very powerful mindset that says the leader's supposed to know what everything. The trust-based leader, we're going to suggest to you, is the leader who thinks, I may have a vision, but the only way that vision is going to get enacted is if I can get my people to trust me and buy into that vision. Now, the important thing there, the difference is that if I'm open to buy-in, then I'm also open to discussion. I'm open to having variation. I'm open to having other people's input, because I recognize that their input could actually create a better vision than the one that I've come up with. And that leader will be an inclusive leader. That leader will be somebody who's willing to listen. And as such, they get better vision, better engagement, more activity from their people, and typically higher outcomes. And there's many case studies. One of them I'd recommend to you, the 7-Day Weekend by Ricardo Semler. Many case studies of trust leaders creating far higher buy-in and outcomes to their people. So mindset is what matters here, and which is why we've started thinking about what is the value of trust, and do I buy into it?
So it's about being intentional. It's about deciding actively, I am going to design a high trust relationship with the people I'm leading, maybe the colleagues I work with on the board. That trust is going to be at the center of the way we work together. How do you design that? We have got the formula, which we're going to show you. Now, there are a bunch of different trust models out there. Some of you may be familiar with the trust equation that was actually developed by a guy called David Maister, who hasn't stolen my name. He's actually my cousin, David. He retired many years ago. Some of you may have heard of him. And he created the trust equation. It's actually called the Maister trust equation, if you Google it. And it was in a book called The Trusted Advisor. But actually, we think even David's equation and some others that are around, which are very, very good, are missing something very important. This is our model. The thing they're all missing is the first one of those dimensions. So there are 3 dimensions to trust that we think you should be actively carving out with the people with whom you're trying to create high trust relationships. The thing there everyone else misses out, as far as we can see, is this one, clarity. So a lot of people talk about the way you behave, the things you do, your intention, but we believe clarity is fundamental. And clarity is fundamental because if there's a misalignment between us in terms of what our expectations of what we're trying to do together, then even if we both do brilliantly in whatever we're doing together, there will be a damage to trust. Let me give you an example. I commission you to do some work for me. You do a fantastic job. It's brilliant, but it wasn't quite what I expected. It didn't live up to my expectations. It fell short because you did everything you thought you needed to do, and I thought you were doing some more. There was no clarity between us. The result is, with the best will in the world between us, trust has been damaged. Next time, I'm going to make damn sure I sit on top of you and make sure you do that job well, because you didn't do everything I expected. So it's not even there about the character of the people, it's about clarity between us. But character is important. We're going to go through each of these in detail in a moment. And this is really to do with the behaviors, the high trust behaviors. What are they? We'll define them in this session. And the final element of this is capability. And this isn't capable, are we capable of doing the job at hand? This is, are we capable of building a high trust relationship between us? And actually, there are times in some situations we've seen where the answer to that is no, and that's okay, that we're going to be in a transactional relationship, and that's just the nature of the beast. I'm going to buy a service from you, you're going to supply a service to me, we'll have a contract between us, and it's as simple as that. And that's the nature of the relationship, and you will fulfill the contract. If that's the nature of the relationship, fine. It won't go beyond that. That's okay. But we just got to be really clear about this stuff. So this is the formula that we urge you to do. Let's start with clarity. I don't know if you can hear, I've got my door open and my neighbor is having a party, I think, outside suddenly. So if it's disturbing, let me know and I'll close the door. Stephen, is that disturbing? Can you hear her speaking?
No, it's fine. It's
okay,
fine.
Cool. Clarity. Clarity means we're working together. Let's take the scenario where I'm leading a team. I want to make sure that we're clear as a team what our ambition is, that we have a direction, we have focus, and that the decisions we take flow from that. And we've got a clear story which everyone understands and believes, that drives the individual behaviors, the changes that are going to come our way, the things that are going to, unforeseen things that will come around. We've got a clear story. And a high trust leader, as Kevin just said, will probably develop this with their team, not simply for their team, but nevertheless, they'll make sure there is a very clear, agreed ambition. This works equally, by the way, if you're building high trust relationship with a client, making sure you've got an aligned ambition, you know what you're both trying to do together, is a important part of this. So clarity is the first thing.
Stuart, can I just compare that to what many of us will have experienced, which is where the boss, the CEO or the boss of the organization stands up at the sort of annual kickoff and talks about, you know, what we did last year, terrific numbers, and we're going to go over the top, everybody, and it's whatever. And they come up with a great vision and, you know, rah, rah and everything. And the problem with that is that in the audience, there's a whole bunch of people sitting there thinking, that sounds good. I wonder what the hell I'm supposed to do about that. I've no idea. Another bunch of people thinking, I'm already rushed off my feet. I can't do any more. Got another bunch of people thinking, I've got no idea what to do, but I'm busy anyway. The only good time that that CEO has is the moment everybody applauds at the end to say, thank God it's coffee break.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so different. We're talking about investing real time and energy in building deep clarity. So I just wanted to contrast most people's experience. And Stephen Fletcher, you were nodding at that. Or,
yeah, it's an interesting subject, Kevin, because in thinking through the program, you may have seen it in chat. I'm glad that, in fact, you started part of the thinking with AI, because there's so much that's being thrown in our direction. It's going to be the death of us all. That we hope to have two good presenters in the autumn schedule. But funnily enough, in part in trust, I was creating having faith in your business. So one of the presentations we've got coming up in a couple of months' time, it's a remarkable man called John Spence, CBE, who had a very senior position in Lloyd's Bank, but is blind, and also a very strong Christian. So he's brought actually trust through his faith and his disability in what he does, and it's a different perspective. But I think it's a trust element which has allowed him to succeed. So that's why I'm particularly interested in this presentation that you're giving. So thank you.
Great. Well, look, I just here's a formula for developing that clarity. I won't go through this in great deal detail just because of time. You can imagine if we're working with clients on this, we spend a lot of time with these questions because we want to get absolute, sharp, focused, agreed answers to them that are exciting. But the simple questions to ask are the basic questions that drive so many things. But the starting point is who's going to benefit from the work we do together? Because inevitably, what you need to start with is the value we're creating for some third party in whatever business or organization you're in. If you're running a hospital, it's obvious, what are the patients looking for from what we're trying to do? If we're running a business, who are our customers? Or we might be an internal function working together and we're thinking we're serving another function. What is the benefit we're trying to create for them? What do they care about? What do they care about? And then, of course, what do we care about? What's important to us in the way we're doing profit, engagement, enjoyment, growth? What are the things we're trying to achieve for ourselves here as well? How will we work together? This is the kind of question I was raising earlier in terms of it may be that we're going to be very transactional, or maybe we're trying to work in partnership as a group, or if we're in a team, what is the way this team is going to work and function? Let's set out our ambition for that. And in terms of the relationship, what is our ambition in our relationship? What's our ambition for our relationship? Is it to be very long term and to grow together, to enjoy working, or are we looking to simply make tons of money together? Is that fundamentally what we're trying to do? Let's be clear what we're trying to achieve together, so that we're not one isn't trying to do one thing, one isn't trying to do something else. So getting those questions right can help create clarity.
So this opportunity to get some input from you. Look, we're not suggesting that people go out deliberately to be unclear, but we may all have experienced lack of clarity. And I just wonder if any experiences that you've had where people got it wrong and what impact did it have? So I'd be very interested. Has anybody got any experience on that?
Amos, you've put a comment in. Am I right? I think you're Amos Jacob rather than Jacob Amos.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
You've put a comment: when narrative does not describe lived experience, the storyteller is quickly forgotten. I wonder if you've got any particular examples of that's relevant here.
Oh, well, I mean, it's taking a slightly arm's reach view, but you look at the way narratives which sufficed for thousands of years, or when there's within a few centuries of industrialization, cease to make sense, and everyone think anxiety becomes a medical condition. I mean, all the biblical stories, which this is sort of what I was thinking in along this line, but those stories which came out of an agricultural world where you have a very direct relationship with natural cycles, very swiftly become embedded in civilizations who a lot of people live in urban environments. And there's a massive disjuncture between the morality that those stories contain and the advice that is within them, and the possibility for people to make sense of the story and to garner the meaning which is there. And I mean, it was mostly just a response to the comments someone made about generational stuff, but just wondering if, and I usually end up being one of the few people representing slightly younger generations, or no, not the youngest by any means on these calls, that dislocation between a world which, while you were growing up, tells you a certain narrative. And the 90s are a fascinating time. I think there's a whole lot of reasons why they had that sort of relaxed tone that they did to grow up in. But then when you see the world as it looks now, and you go, the stories about inevitable progress, the stories about trust in institutions, well, it's very hard to see in lived experience where those stories have been stimulated from. Intellectually, it's possible to understand, but that's not necessarily, well, the story of intellectuality is also something that maybe lots of people don't have a reason to indulge in.
Can I pick up on just something you're saying, which I think is very important in my experience, from my perspective, which is, if we're in the context we're discussing here, which is in the context you're leading an organization, a business, whatever it happens to be, it has to be true. So it's no good coming up with some great, exciting words that aren't true, that aren't actual, doesn't reflect the reality of your business, what you're really trying to achieve, So, and if it's not true, of course, you destroy trust. One of the powers of getting clarity is that and you'll see the rest of what we describe in our trust triangle, is that you're describing what you need, what you want to be true, and then it's beholden upon you through the behaviors and the actions you take to make those words true, whatever it is you describe. So your point is very powerful, which is whatever clarity you develop has to be founded in real truth. It can't be a load of waffle or
so. Bob, you had an example you wanted to share with the group.
Sorry, finding my mute button. Yeah, I think it was relevant to what you were saying, and it's not about internal to an organization. It's from a consulting point of view, working for another, for a client, where the client at an individual level, and I'll keep it anonymized, clearly had some expectations about what he wanted us to come in and do. And basically that was to rubber stamp his findings that he was presenting to his executive and the board. And when we didn't do that, then he got extremely upset, and it resulted not only in a breakdown of trust between us on the engagement, but a huge breakdown between the two firms that took quite a long period of time to fix, and quite a big financial cost to the firm I was working for at the time. And it was A, entirely avoidable, and B, actually pretty deceitful on behalf of the of the guy that was putting us into a corner to try and essentially get him to just clarify, confirm, put a Big Four stamp on what he was doing, which was interesting.
Very interesting. So look, there was another good example about corporate values that was put into the chat. I mean, actually, corporate values, when they weren't lived, destroyed trust in organizations. They made cynicism, not team working. And it's really dangerous. So we're flagging a very, very big thing here, which is that your behaviors have to flow from your clarity, your vision. And it's about, as we say, turning warm words into real behaviors. And then, but the next thing we just want to flag here, if I go to the next slide, Stuart, one of the things that we work with people say, look, it's not about the behaviors you choose, it's about the consistency with which you apply them. Now, so first step is to start assessing consistency. And Stuart, could we just put these 5 questions up and just give you some example? And you may wish to do this for yourself right now. And we're not going to ask you to put any of your scores or admit to anything here. But if we just go through them, Stuart, just put them up.
No, they can't one at a time, and then I can't do all 5, unfortunately. So,
okay.
So the way I've done the very clever reveal.
Well done. So look, here's an example. Your team's made a mistake. Important tasks can't be completed. Do you let the colleagues know you've made a mistake and take responsibility for the consequence? Now, and we get people to score this. 0, never. No, I always try and get on with it and get the work done without them knowing. 10, yeah, I'd always be upfront with people. Go for the second one, Stuart. Thank you. Your colleague starts to complain bitterly about a colleague and their failure to deliver on their part of a project, or just their failure, full stop. Do you join in and share their feelings about the failure? Or do you see the positive side? And we go through these with clients, and I'll let you just take a moment to look at those. Do you sit in front of the aircraft? Here's a very interesting one. Business is not going well. You're aware that there are real issues coming up. A worried employee asks you if the business issues may put their role under threat. Do you tell them not to worry? So, fifth one. It's widely known that a senior colleague makes inappropriate remarks about a colleague of the opposite sex. They do it again in front of you. Do you say nothing because everybody knows this is what they're like? So the point here is not that these are the right or wrong behaviors. The point here is, can people read me? Do they understand what I'm likely to do or how I react in any given situation? Because if they can, we've at least got a fundamental underpinning that would allow people to start to build trust. But actually, perhaps not. These may not all be good trust building behaviors. It's about now selecting what are the key trust building behaviors with my team or with my business that I'm then going to apply this consistency with. And if you were going through those thinking, actually, I'm not very consistent, that may be the very first thing you start to work on. Consistency, and then the behaviors of trust. Thanks, Stuart.
Well, let's look at the principles of the behaviors of trust. So you mentioned we've done this work a number of times, and you can start with a blank sheet of paper and ask people, what are the high trust behaviors you want to demonstrate as a group, as a team, as partners, as customer and supplier, whatever it happens to be. And some of the same things come up again and again. And we've distilled this into these 5 principles of behavior. And I'll just whip through them quickly. But again, you can imagine that having really deep discussion with the people involved on each of these is a very rich discussion, not in theory, but what does this really mean in practice in the situations you are going to face together? Because everyone knows what those situations are likely to be. So you've got consideration there, which is the intention to really seek value for the other party as well as yourself. If you're selling, you want to seek value for your customer as well as for yourself, and think about them first, or with your team first. But then courage is also to make sure that you are, sometimes people go straight from being bold to being a doormat. And actually what we want people to be courageous, because they'll think of the rest of their team, if they're in a service role, or indeed think of what their organization needs. They mean that you've got to think of both sides of this. So being courageous in that as well. Honesty, of course, but honesty is not just being not corrupt, it's being ruthlessly honest at all times, so that people know that if you say something, you mean it, and it's true. Loyalty is it's a great question that Kevin had before. It's kind of always acting as if the other people are in the room in anything you say. You're loyal to your customer, you're loyal to your colleagues. So loyalty is important. What does that look like in practice? It's a really interesting discussion. And ambition, the power of synergy. What does it, if we're working together, why should we create more? How are we going to create more value than if we were working discreetly, as it were, side by side, but working together as a team? And that goes for your team in your organization, or you working together with a client. How do we work together to create real synergistic value? Very, very powerful questions that can really flash out the kind of behaviors that you want to see in the relationship you have.
Which brings us to the third element of the trust model, which is capability. How will we work together? Let me tell you a quick story of when this doesn't work. One of our clients was a large JV of themselves, large organizations who'd come together to bid for a big contract. And they carved out what they thought they were going to do in the contract. But of course, once it's awarded, everybody started to think about, how can I maximize my own success rather than maximizing the success of the JV? How can I get mine? And what quickly became clear is that they had every process in terms of how you should deliver to the client, but they had zero process about how to govern the relationship. They hadn't gone through the work of saying, what's the clear like what clarity do we have about the outcomes? What are the behaviors that we will exhibit? And when things go well, how do we react? And when things go badly, how do we react? And they had zero ability to govern the relationship rather than the contract. And that's very much the difference here as to whether we're partners where we have shared outcomes and shared benefits, or contractors who work with a piece of paper. So capability is very much about working in partnership.
So how do you do this? We've got formulas for this too. And again, you can imagine that every one of these boxes, these questions, create powerful conclusions if properly explored. But we're obviously giving a surface view of this right now. But you can take this away and work on it in your own situations if you're leading organizations. How are we going to work together? That's the question on the capability. What's the basis of our relationship? Are we capable of building this relationship we've said we want to have together? That's the question. That's the exam question, if you like, for this dimension of the trust triangle. Now, firstly, how we're going to work together is based on those 5 principles of behavior that we just went through. So that's how we're going to behave with each other. But then there's the way we run this relationship. And it's those 4 boxes hold the clues. How are we going to manage and govern the relationship that we have? If you're a leader and you think about this in terms of your team, or you're the CEO of a business, how are we going to manage and govern the relationship that I have with my colleagues, let's say my board, not simply how the transactions we're going to have, the way we're going to make decisions, how we're going to make sure we collaborate in the way we reach those decisions. How are we going to hold each other and ourselves accountable for those behaviors that we've agreed to, for the ambition that we said we had, not simply for the contract that we've got between us? How are we going to resolve issues? And as Kevin just said, and the example he quoted is such a powerful one where we did this work with them. We looked at the issues they'd already had. We worked with these guys 3 years into the relationship, and there was hundreds of millions of pounds at stake in that relationship because it was a big infrastructure contract they'd won, and they were not behaving as partners. As a result, they were losing money daily in the failure of the relationship between them. So we got them to identify the typical issues they were facing on a regular basis. And we looked in that case of, if you say you want to be partners, how do partners solve these problems? For example, the customer is putting budget pressure on. You've discovered some problem in the delivery that no one could have anticipated. How do partners solve that? And how does a contractor and subcontractor resolve it? And they're very different ways of sorting those issues out. What do you choose? Do you choose trust, or do you choose to be contractual, transactional?
Stuart, there's just if I may interrupt, Steve Gorton has put a very interesting example that it'd be interesting to see how they resolved it. In the chat, Steve, you've said you saw a program where £500 million program, and one part of the team wanted to put their own equipment in rather than buy something more effective. How did they resolve that, or how did they deal with that between the 2 parties?
Great question.
Well, this is something I was working with this company for about 3 years, but this is old information from the end of 2018. They didn't actually resolve it. It ended up going to the bid partner. But what actually happened was, and you were talking about losing money, it meant that proven equipment from elsewhere, which could have gone straight into use, was delayed, and they had to, the pressure was such, although it was theoretically a 50-50 split on the JV, of the powers, that the center of power was more with the equipment rather than service provider, if you will. So as far as I understand it, it was never resolved. They just said it's got to be ours because we own half of this this company, this JV. There was a tussle, but I think it was the center of gravity. So when it comes to trust, have we gone into this on an equal basis was an absolutely key thing. I think in some ways I was surprised to win the bid. And when they did, it was a bit like shit, what do we do now?
Yeah, one of the things they don't that we don't see enough of is that a partnership is formed with the customer post bid.
Yeah.
And that's one of the critical things that when we talk about this stuff, JVs, we want that to include the person who we're trying to serve and super serve, as Stuart often says, and they don't do it. They sit back in an office and then try and carve it up again at the very best. It's so low trust, it's unbelievable, and it, as you've just illustrated, costs lots of money. Stuart, I just thought that was an interesting.
Oh, it's great. Thank you for that. And one of the key words used there, Steve, which is important, is power. And so in so many situations, what you actually have is a power relationship. One party has more power of the other and then exerts that power and destroys trust. So guess what happens is next time round, they're gonna, it's what happens. So deciding this kind of stuff up front, how are we going to resolve that kind of issue? You get this right and you save a fortune, and you super serve, as Kevin said, the client. The other thing is how we're rewarded, not just how we're rewarded financially, that may be in the contract, but how are we going to reward or penalize each other if we don't fulfill this trust triangle bargain that we've made at the beginning. And that's why it's so important in the governance of it, particularly in larger relationships, to make sure there's regular reviews, regular review and discussion about how's this working, how's our relationship going. And the other thing that if we think about that into that house in terms of our team, the same plot, that team is then much better suited to build high trust relationships with other parties, with customers, with other departments, perhaps in the organization, with other organizations they need to collaborate with, because they've sorted this internally. They can apply the same thinking with others. Kevin.
So that brings us back to, so how do you bring all this together? And there's no fancy way of doing it other than you need to really go through this process and invest significant amounts of time, but then you need to write it up. And we have a process to write it up. We call a relationship agreement, where we capture not just the headlines, but the real detail, so that everybody gets a chance. And we often, when we're doing this, we often role play through the implications of all the behaviors. For example, we'll role play through disaster scenarios, but it's about investing time to build commitment to the vision, to the behaviors, and to how we will govern this relationship. And then we got this fourth element called consequences. Now, Stuart often says people are so excited about the wedding, we've won. They forget about the marriage. How will we behave during the marriage? And if we behave badly, what should happen? And I don't mean, it's not the outcome. It's perfectly possible to have a terrible relationship and still by accident achieve a good outcome. Equally, it's perfectly possible to have a really great relationship and not get the outcome because some external factor intervened. We have to divorce outcome and relationship when we're talking about how will you manage and what are the consequences. And again, I want to reinforce, it's not just about thinking about all the wonderful things that are going to happen when we're wonderful partners. It's being realistic about, if a partner does not live up to this relationship agreement, what will be the natural consequences that we'll all agree to up front? And if we all do these things, what do we expect the consequences in terms of relationship to be? And these fundamental conversations need to happen right up front, and they need to be revisited on a regular basis. Because if you just write it, stick it in the drawer, and it isn't the way that you live the relationship, it's not worth the effort, frankly.
Yeah, all words. So, quick recap of the things we've gone through today. You can see them there on the screen. It's one of the key thoughts is it's intentional. If you're going to choose trust as a leader, you need to be intentional about it and consciously do so. And we've set out how we think you can do so. There's a handout. We're going to come to questions right in this second. But I just wanted to make sure that you're reminded that in this world where technology is becoming so front of mind, we think being human is a key differentiator. Now, perfect for time for a hand to come up, because we love to throw a discussion. Bob, I'd love you to kind of facilitate that.
Sure, Bob, it's up to you.
Right, is that, yeah, yes, there's the one thing that struck me about all this, and I have worked in a lot of joint ventures and collaborative working relationships, partnering, whatever you call it, for many years, and sometimes very successfully. And the thing that always strikes me is there has to be, to an extent, an incentive to work together. Now, that may be that everyone gets a fair outcome. That may be the one, but people have to see that there is an end benefit to them. And sometimes, particularly with public servants, that can be a particular problem, because they won't take the risks. In fact, you've generally found, and again, my experience has been, that it's the public servants were very reluctant and not able sometimes to enter into the kind of relationships that will actually deliver success and are trusting relationships, because there is always someone else they have to report to. And you have to understand this. But having said that, I have had very good trusting relationships with people. I would say again, though, coming back to your point about the emotional side of it, it's always a small number of people that make it work. And it's the relationship between 1, 2, 3, 4 people that actually make the whole thing work. And I've proved that many times over the years.
So can I quickly?
Yeah, please do come back on that. Yeah.
Recognize absolutely the truth of what you say, Bob. Having done some of this work with a hospital trust, for example.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure other people on the call have had experience where there's a lot of stress in the management of hospital trusts and trying to balance all the different needs. And what my experience is, what you have to do is actually step away from the daily issues and just get people to consider, what are the alternatives here? We can continue to work at daggers drawn, right? All fighting our corner, and we can continue doing what we're doing, but could we consider there's a better way? And you actually have to spend a lot of time, or I had to spend a lot of time, getting to evaluate what could a trusting team do differently.
Yes,
I'd like to just make one quick point. I'd love to come to something Bob's put in the chat as well, which is interesting. But just in response to something you said, I think it's such a powerful point. That where you see high trust relationships, so often it's down to a few individuals.
Yeah.
And the problem there, of course, particularly if you've got large, complex relationships between organizations, such as a large joint venture and a long-term construction project, but many, many other examples, is that's a point of vulnerability as well as strength.
It is.
So the thing we're trying to get leaders to do and organizations to do is to create organizational high trust relationships that go beyond the individuals. And it's a tough one, because you're absolutely right. And something that Bob said in the chat is, he said they might even agree consequences, but they're not enforced because people are scared to. And that's a really important, which is where the dimension of courage is so important.
Yeah.
And also, I have to say, I would say this because I've got vested interest in saying it, but it's true. Having a third party there that is holding your feet to the fire, having a consultancy like us, and there are others that hold your feet to the fire and say, hold on a second, I'm going to hold a mirror up to what you're doing here, and this isn't what you agreed. Yes. And you said if you did this, this is what would happen. Now, if you're not going to hold each other to account for this, that's your call, your ultimately. But you've got to be clear that your trust is being destroyed right now. I can see it in front of me. And you've got to have that kind of tough call out, I think. And
yes.
Bob,
my experience has been that we've had the third party there at some stage, and they certainly do make an important contribution. The other little point, though, I would say is that people start to think about a trusting relationship too late.
Yes.
The day you put out an inquiry, or you put out ask for expressions of interests, or you go and tell people about your project or what you need, that's when the initial impression, and you start to build trust or not. And so often it's or not, and someone thinks they can do it much later on when they've been through a hard tender process and they've really been aggressive all the way, and then suddenly, oh well, now we're here, chaps, we'll work together, won't we?
But there's someone who was going to be on this call tonight who I can see hasn't made it, but I think he might watch a recording, a guy called Martin Perks from National Highways, and he's trying very hard in that infrastructure, big money infrastructure space, to create the environment where you're building high trust relationships even before the contract's gone out, so that there's collaboration even before. And it's a tough one for all sorts of reasons. But anyway, let's open this up to other people who want to come in.
John, you got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'm back in the room, and I'm a former colleague of Martin Perks, and very aware of the. I was just about to put something in the chat actually when you sort of linked the comments up. Project 13 for national infrastructure projects was an absolute game changer in terms of moving away from transactional delivery to collaborative delivery partnerships. And I was quite disruptive in that space. I think the concept, and I'm sorry, I do apologize if you covered this because I missed part of the presentation. But I think the concept of building trust is becoming increasingly outdated. I think, as you've been alluding to, it's giving trust from the outset and making and setting clear boundaries on how you wish within organizations and teams and individuals for that trust to be used. And I found using that approach in the past actually empowers people to work to do their best at the most appropriate level far earlier than having to build trust and build those transactional relationships. So yeah, Martin Perks was instrumental in leading the Project 13 change across national highways, and he's a very learned professor in such things.
Yeah.
Anything to add, chaps?
No, I think I'd be interested if because I see Amos has got his hand up, and I'm interested to get the discussion opened up. I think I would suggest.
Yep, Amos, go on.
Cool, thank you. So I guess I just wondered if you had any thoughts or experiences, or just kind of wanted to riff on trust from people who are, well, how you navigate this when you're less senior in an organization, because there's obviously the sense in which you go and you can show the same sort of leadership through example as someone at any point in the hierarchy, but the opportunities to use trust to leverage building teams and to demonstrate how much more efficient and productive and happy, frankly, you can be when you take this approach, obviously requires the authority to allow people the space to show they're trustworthy. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts on, I mean, a lot of this, it feels like it's been going, talking about the executive leadership and kind of higher ends of projects, but how you think it's worth navigating this from the bottom, if there's anything apart from just kind of plod on.
Let me pick up on that. And I actually don't think this matters whether you're the most junior employee or you're a senior person. It's about extending and being trustworthy. And to do that, as I may have said earlier, it's about thinking about what is it that the other person is trying to achieve, and how can I best support them in doing that? Now, so a recent example, it was a senior guy who was running a division of Greece of a big company, and he was doing a pitch on the performance of his team. And we said, okay, so you're just going to be one of many people who do a pitch, but actually, what is it your CEO needs to get from this session that would cause them to trust you? And he said, well, I'm not absolutely sure. So the first thing is to build clarity, and it's reaching out. And I would say the same thing on a junior person. If somebody asks you to do something, just don't do what you think they want. Really invest the time to say, look, my ambition, my intent is to do this job as well as I possibly can for you. What is it that you need to get out of this? And what are you expecting of me? And what behaviors should I exhibit? And how will I account to it? So you go through the same thinking at any level. How can I build trust with somebody by reaching out and understanding their ambition and making sure, by the way, that you can deliver? Because if they've got an ambition and you don't know how to deliver on it, then it's not trustworthy for you to just go and say, well, I don't know what they want, but I'll go and do my damn best, right? It's about having the courage to go back and say, help me. I want to do the best for you. Help me with what I need to do to support you. So I hope that helps, Amos, as a quick thought.
Just to add to that, if I may, just briefly, the book we're writing, which is called Choose Trust, is not aimed simply at those at the most senior level, even though it's by economist books. It's aimed to be a handbook for anyone in their business professional work environment. And it specifically talks about the sorts of things Kevin's just described to you, which is that anyone in any situation in their working world can just use this way of thinking. You don't have to draw up a formal relationship agreement in a low level, in a project, for example, or a quick piece of work you're doing. But having that thinking that Kevin's just described becomes a useful tool to consistent. It's like a Rosetta Stone of translating what you're trying to, the project you're trying to do into something that's going to build trust. And it even applies if you're having a difficult conversation, same sort of thinking. What are we trying to, what would be a win for you in this discussion, etc. Kevin's gone around the circle, I don't need to repeat it. So you build trust. You adopt, if you like, a leadership of the relationship, even if that person is technically more senior than you. You can lead the relationship, which is a powerful idea, I think. Whereas we're getting close to the end, but I see there's another hand up.
Yeah, Adrian, I'll bring you in a sec if I may, but I've just got to follow on to what you guys have just been saying. It's an interesting parallel with what the military talk about as mission command and empowerment, because that is heavily based around trust and turning around and telling people what to do, not how to do it, and giving them a box within which to operate and letting them get on with it, and trusting them to do that, and equally trusting them to come back if they need to extend the boundaries of the box. And or if they've got questions about the way they need to go on and do it. And it's a really, it works brilliantly well in any organization that does it, I think, because it does create better, stronger leaders much more quickly because they feel trusted, they feel empowered, and they can get on and do it. And the only other thing that I was going to say as well was the word that you haven't really mentioned, I don't think, unless I've missed it, but is authenticity. Because I do think that there's at an individual level, trust is not something you turn around and switch on and off. That I've seen people who believe they can do that, and actually you go, no chance. You've got four faces, and which one am I looking at today? Whereas actually, if you're authentic all the way through, then that can be good or bad. But if you're a trustworthy individual, then I think that's something you build from the ground up.
I absolutely agree with that, but we kind of wrap that into the consistency. So if I'm inconsistent because I treat my boss differently, so I treat my employees to people read it very quickly, and you have no basis for trust if you're inconsistent.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Sorry, Adrian, yours.
Yes, Stuart, Kevin, how are you measuring success? There's a danger, and I think Bob touched on it, sort of authenticity and people paying lip service and saying, trust me, and just playing themselves as the good guy, and you need to act in a particular way. How are you able to show success from the work that you do? And is the sentiment and growing, or are there a lot of people out there that are just using this as a way of leveraging the other party? Bit as we talk about collaboration as well, you know, everyone says they're doing it, but are they?
Go on, Kevin, you go.
So I was just going to say that we could look at Project 13 as a measure of how do you measure success. So, and there are a whole bunch of analysis about why projects under 13 are more successful, faster, under budget. So there's those kind of measures. But Stuart, what did you want to say?
I think there are two things. There's lead measures and lag measures. So the lead, if we're going to decide we're going to behave in a certain way, we're going to do certain things, then the lead measures are those measures. For example, we're going to meet regularly to review the relationship. Are we doing that regularly? Is that happening? There are lots of other things like that. I won't go through a long list now that are lead measures. But then the lag measures are the outcomes we're trying to achieve that reflect the ambition we've agreed. So if, you know, is the needle moving on the thing we're trying to achieve together? It should be. And to what, and of course, the question is, to what extent can we attribute this relationship building that we've been doing to that success? Is one component. As it happens, you can see often that it's a major component. For example, in the case of the partnership we discussed, the JV, suddenly they were getting things done on time. They were no longer, the issues they were facing that were costing them money were disappearing. There's real money attached to that. There's massive amounts of money attached to it, actually. So there are hard measures that are related to the failure of trust that you correct if the problem's already there, or that you if everything's working brilliantly because you've established trust from the beginning. It's difficult to say it's because we established trust, but it becomes one of the magic ingredients that's been true. Our lead measures should tell us that we're doing the things we said we'd do. I mean, in terms of are people actually doing it, there is, Project 13, again, is, for those that know it, is one of those examples. Loads of no shortage of warm words, no shortage of great intention. Turning that into reality is challenging in a lot of situations, and I think that's there are some where it works brilliantly, but no shortage of warm words, like the values on the wall that someone referred to earlier, which they said they used to have, they still have, as I'm sure everyone's aware, or on the website. So noted. Now I'm just aware of time.
Yeah, I think it's been really good, and noticing there's thanks and congratulations there from a number of people who are beginning to drop off the call. I think, if you want to just draw it together, and then I can do a proper vote of thanks.
Sure. Just want to say, put that on the screen there, because I just want to repeat, if you want to get in touch with us for any reason, and if you want these slides, do reach out to Sophie and she'll respond, or if you want to have a conversation with us, she'll set up a meeting with one of us. And to thank you, just to preempt the thanks, to thank you very much for inviting us to be part of this thing. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, we've hugely enjoyed it. I mean, typically, it's been a very thoughtful and thought-provoking presentation. And of course, the advantage is that everyone who's on this call, plus the number of people who apologized and couldn't be, will all be receiving a full copy of the presentation, which will have the details of where to get the slides. I mean, if anyone wants to find out that, just drop me a line at stephen.fletcher@theleadersclub.org. But it has been a brilliant presentation on a very warm evening. I know you're aching to get to the beach down in Brighton and enjoy a drink, and I shall be enjoying and putting my hand up again, but in a different way. But to you both, ladies and gentlemen on the call, unmute yourself and give this wonderful pair of guys, long-standing members, a round of applause, please. They'll be somewhat muted with this clip on here.
Thank you.
Please, I mean, we value very much, both of you, your membership, your insight and input. So there's a couple of things that we've got coming up in AI. We'd love to see you involved with that and your take on all these things. But for now, thanks very much indeed. All the best. But I hope to see as many of you as possible at the Challenge of China next week, which will be interesting. But for now, thanks and good night.
Thank you.